Hi everyone, welcome back. We are going to be speaking about medieval Islamic history and specifically the art of the Umayyads. We're going to look at a different artistic program that developed in the 700s, one that was never taken on ultimately as a mainstream one, at least for public spaces, but continued to be used for private spaces, and it's quite different from what we know. Now, what do we know? If you remember in previous lessons, we talked about the Dome of the Rock, this Qubat al-Sahra. This was the first Islamic monumental building. It was built by a figure, the new leader of the Muslim community, Abd al-Malik, in Jerusalem in 692, but it was never really clear what it was. In fact, if we look at contemporary buildings at that time and we compare it to its layout, which you can see here, you can actually figure out that it's very similar to a Christian martyrium, a sort of eight-sided church that was common in the Roman Empire in Palestine. But it's obviously not a mosque, it's not a church. It is another type of place, a sort of possibly a staging area for the end of times and Judgment Day, when everyone will be resurrected and judged and sent to heaven, etc., etc. And it was decorated with these beautiful mosaics on the interior that are relatively still the original ones from all the way back then. And this is basically the earliest example of Islamic monumental art we have. Now, of course, what you will notice is that in the Dome of the Rock itself, there is no images. And in fact, if you were to read the inscriptions that accompany these vegetal motifs, you have actually a very strong, clearly not anti-Christian message, but a message differentiating Islam from Christianity and from other monotheistic religions, specifically by pointing out that the Trinity is not correct. So that's one vision, right? And we see this also in other places like the Umayyad Mosque in Damascus, which was built a few decades later by the son of Abd al-Malik, in which it was built on the site of a former basilica, taking actually many of the same forms, basically. It still looks essentially like a basilica. It's covered in beautiful, beautiful mosaics made by Christian craftsmen in gold mosaic tiles and elsewhere. But we, again, do not have any images of animals or people, unlike that which would be common in a Byzantine church or elsewhere. Now, this is the development of an aniconic type of art. And as we'll see, we also saw it in the development of coins and images on coins, in which eventually coins stopped featuring the actual figure of the ruler or something like it, and instead relied only on script to get their message across, to use script as an image. Now, that was one development. There was another development that was occurring in the same period in the 700s. As the Umayyads developed a public and iconic artistic program, they continued actually to use paintings, sculptures, and all sorts of other things in their private spaces, in particular in their desert palaces. These were essentially a bunch of hunting lodges that they built outside of their capital in Damascus. Damascus being up here, here's Syria, here today is a bunch of desert castles in Jordan. These are places that they would go out to hunt, relax, have fun. They usually comprised, places for hosting the royal party, a bathhouse, and place to chill. There's actually quite a few of these. As you can see, there's at least 9. One of the most famous ones is this one, Mushatta, which the remnants of which actually were excavated and then transported to Berlin, where you can see them in the Museum of Islamic Arts, and they form a major exhibit there. They're quite impressive, but there's still a lot in situ, such as this one, Qasr Khair al-Sharqi, today found in the middle of the desert. And what's interesting is that some of these have actually still a relatively well preserved and keep, for example, they're mosaics. And what you see in this mosaic is actually unlike the mosaics on the Dome of the Rock, unlike in the Umayyad Mosque in Damascus. You see, for example, clear animal imagery, figurative imagery that you didn't see in these other type of public religious buildings. And more interesting, if you go to another part of Khirbat Majfar, you would see statues, including this one, which, as you can see, has been partially reconstructed, but you can kind of get a sense of what it looked like. You have actually a figure with a sword standing on top of a pillar of what seems to be lions. Now, is this supposed to be the caliph? Is this supposed to be the leader? People like Al-Walid or Abd al-Malik, as they're building this new type of pleasure palaces or hunting lodges. And in fact, one good clue that we have is the image from an early coin, Umayyad coin, by Abd al-Malik. Remember, we were talking about these coins, how they're experimenting with this new type of imagery, this artistic program. And there is one coin on one side has this, what's called the standing sheikh figure, which might actually be the caliph or the Amir al-Mu'mineen himself, Abd al-Malik. On the other side is a sort of cross that has been decrucified. It no longer has the perpendicular piece. It's just a clear symbol of non-cross. But if you look at the standing sheikh figure, what is clearly seen here is, which again was adopted from Byzantine royal iconography, it seems to be the same one when we look at the statue here. And it seems like that he's basically continuing this artistic program that he abandoned on the coins and the public coins in his private lodges. And again, we can see basically a continuity from Byzantine coinage, from Byzantine mosaics into these private palaces. Now, if we move, for example, to other places, says Qasr Gabi, we can actually see even frescoes depicting common scenes that would have been depicted in any Byzantine or late Roman palace, such as frescoes depicting the earth, musicians, and scenes of royal enjoyment, and in particular also hunting scenes. Again, these were often hunting palaces. Now you might ask, well, where are they getting the models for these hunting images? Well, not surprisingly, they're taking them from other royal palaces, including, for example, Sasanian models. So this is on the right a plate, silver plate with a Sasanian hunting scene on top of a camel hunting gazelles, and we can actually see basically the same type of scene now put on a horse, but essentially a continuation of the Sasanian king, in this case the Islamic king, hunting on a horse in these multiple scenes. Then we also have very interesting but unclear examples of basically attendants, bathhouse attendants, female slaves in this case, who would be attending in this place and actually depicted figuratively in multiple ways in these palaces. Now, the most interesting palace of these all is a place called Qusayr Amra, which Qusayr means little palace. Amra is a name, so a little palace of Amra. And if you go into it, you actually have a massive set of frescoes depicting in the bathhouse and in different parts all sorts of different scenes, including this very interesting bathhouse scene of a bathing woman, and a whole variety of others. Clearly, this was meant to be a luxurious place. These frescoes have been slightly restored, but they were essentially forgotten until the 19th century when they were sort of rediscovered by Bedouins, who then took archaeologists there. And that's why they managed to kind of stay untouched in these different places. And in fact, we can look in different similar bathhouse scenes, again, across all of these different palaces, from this statue to this fresco to this mosaic depiction of a similar thing in other Byzantine, Jordanian, Palestinian ruins at that time. We can also look at, interestingly, the kind of furniture or metal pieces that they would have used, some of which have survived, such as this brazier, which we can date to the Umayyad period from, that would have been used in these palaces, which again clearly uses both animal and figurative motifs. And there's pieces of basically stucco decoration, which repeats the same type of motifs, not in metal, but in stucco on this place. The most interesting parts, though, is that then there is a series of frescoes which depict essentially classical themes, right? So philosophy, history, and poetry having a discussion embodied as muses having a discussion in this place. And you can go through Kusei Ramna and see kind of the continuation of, for example, a fresco depicting the zodiac in its different halls. This one I picked to show you. You have other, again, animals, people, different figures. But most interestingly, you have a piece that is difficult to think, but you have to understand exactly. So I've put up this recreation or illustration. But we have clearly is kind of a hall of kings on each side. Now, there's this 6 kings fresco, which looks like this today. It's difficult to make out who exactly they are, but you can actually go through and try to understand some of them based off the inscriptions, which are in Arabic and in Greek. One is the Byzantine emperor. One seems to be the Visigoth or Spanish emperor, King Roderick. And then there's the Sasanian king and the Ethiopian king, and then 2 other unidentified kings, Turkish and Chinese kings. And so what it shows is that these guys, these Umayyad kings, leaders, are already seeing themselves as the heads of empires and comparing themselves to other kings, and are creating courtly spaces and courtly forms of decoration, which are very different from the kind of Islamic spaces that are being developed. So keep that in mind when we think about the development of an iconic artistic program in the early Umayyad years, which keeps getting continued in the Abbasid period, that there's actually another world of Umayyad art out there. Now, that art didn't become the standard format. It didn't become part of the repertoire of Islamic art. It essentially remained in Umayyad palaces, and those palaces were abandoned after 750 when the dynasty died out. But we have to keep this in mind. And in fact, probably in the palaces, there would have been many different types of figurative images. And in fact, figurative images continued to be used throughout Islamic art in many different ways, especially in the form of illustrations. Now, I'm going to give you a little warning in case you are offended by a picture of the Prophet Muhammad. So here is, for example, the idea is often that the Prophet Muhammad is not visually depicted, but this isn't true because he's actually depicted in many different manuscripts and illustrations at the time, especially for private audiences. He might not be depicted in public spaces, such as on the wall of a mosque, but as people would constantly depict Jesus on a wall of a church, but he was depicted in many different formats, such as this Miraj Nome, or depictions of his heavenly ascension. This is an interesting piece, actually written, I believe, in Mongol, in a different non-Islamic script. This was done, I think, for the Mongol court. And then on the top you have here in Turkish, I believe, a translation of what is going on. Sorry, this was the Timurid court that was made for but in in an Uyghur script. And what you have here on the top is Turkish describing what exactly is going on in each of these scenes. But in each of them, again, you have the Prophet Muhammad ascending to it. Here's a closer view of the different scripts, this Uyghur script and the Turkish script on the top. And one of the points that I want to make is that ultimately the Prophet Muhammad isn't depicted visually. And again, visual depictions of, figurative depictions of humans and animals are not generally made in public, but are often on the folios of manuscripts which circulate sometimes privately, sometimes often within court circles, but there are other forms of portraiture that came to exist. One of the interesting ones is a non-figurative type of portraiture called a hilya. This is essentially a portrait of the Prophet Muhammad, but done solely through text. This text inside is a kind of description of what he actually looked like, according to sources, Islamic sources. So it's done in nice calligraphy, and it kind of gives you a sense of a body or a head and some body, but without any sort of actual naturalistic depiction. But if you were to read it, it would say, for example, in the circular portion, it describes the Prophet Muhammad, says, he was not too tall and attenuated, nor was he excessively short. He was medium-sized. His hair was not short and curly, nor was it lank, but it was smooth and wavy. His face was not narrow, nor was it round, not fully round. His skin was a ruddy white. His eyes were black. He had long eyelashes, big boned, had wide shoulders, no body hair. So one of the things you'll get to notice is that because the Prophet Muhammad has to be the perfect person, he is the average mean of all people. So he's not in any one extreme. He doesn't have too much hair or too little. His hair is not too curly or too short. It's always in the middle. He's kind of perfectly average. And then it goes on to describe his temperament, etc. Now, these hilyas are made until today and are still a common form of calligraphic art that is being used. Just keeping this in mind as you think about the types of figurative images and artistic programs that are used in Islamic world.